My name is Cora Whitman, 34 years old, living in the northern suburbs of Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm the communications director at a software development company. Work is hectic, life moves fast, but one thing has never changed. I am Ava's mother. I know, I didn't give birth to Ava. But every morning when she runs into my bedroom, hair tousled, brown eyes sparkling just because I'm still there, I know that motherhood doesn't need blood to be real. Ava came into my life like a sudden storm. 10 years ago, my cousin Becky, who was like a sister to me, gave birth to Ava at the age of 23. After her divorce, Becky raised Ava alone, and I was always around to help whenever I could. Then, tragedy struck. One snowy night, a truck hit Becky and her new boyfriend head on Interstate 94. Ava, only 3 at the time, was home with the babysitter. I got the call at 3 a.m. Driving to the hospital, my hands shook so badly I could barely hold the wheel. The police said I was the only person legally eligible to be her guardian. Becky's mother had disappeared years ago, and her father was in prison for fraud. There was no one else. I was it. The adoption process took nearly 8 months to complete. During that time, I worked full-time while also taking Ava to preschool, therapy, regular checkups. I had to learn how to be a mom with no preparation. Fevers, nightmares, parent-teacher meetings where I was the only one who had no idea what to do. But, slowly, Ava began to hold my hand each night as she fell asleep. She no longer flinched at the sound of sirens. And I knew, no matter how unfair life had been, I hadn't let it break a 3-year-old's spirit. 3 years later, I met Jonah at a communications conference. He was the keynote speaker, tall, witty, and had a voice that could hush a full room. After his talk, he came down, shook my hand, and said, "I've never seen anyone take notes like you. You must be impossible to please." I smiled. "Maybe you'll try anyway." Jonah didn't have kids of his own, but from the first time he came to our home, he sat on the floor and built Lego castles with Ava for 2 hours. When she slipped and spilled juice, he didn't yell or frown. He just said, "Looks like the floor was thirsty." A year later, Jonah proposed. He knelt down, offered me a delicate sapphire ring, then turned to Ava and pulled out a heart-shaped necklace. "Would you let me be part of your family?" Ava nodded so hard she nearly cried. I had never seen a child's eyes glow like that. We had our wedding that September, on a warm afternoon by Lake Minnetonka. Jonah didn't just say vows to me. He said them to Ava, in front of everyone. Not long after, he finalized the legal adoption. Just like that, we became a family of 3. Simple, but complete. I thought everything would be peaceful from then on. I truly believed that. Until the day I came home earlier than planned, opened the front door, and saw Ava, my little girl, the one I had held through countless sleepless nights, kneeling alone, scrubbing the kitchen floor. No one else was home. Not a single soul. I stood, frozen. I still remember the first evening I brought Ava to my in-laws' house. Martin and Cheryl Whitman. They lived in the suburbs of Stillwater, in a vintage-style home with a white picket fence and wisteria vines curling around the front porch. Cheryl opened the door with a tight smile, lips pressed together like they weren't used to stretching. She looked at me, then down at Ava, who was clinging tightly to my hand, and said softly, "Oh, is this your stepdaughter?" I didn't like the word step, but I smiled and replied, "This is Ava, my daughter. She officially carries the Whitman name." Jonah gave my hand a gentle squeeze. I knew he felt it too. That thin, unmistakable tension, being judged without a single word spoken. Family gatherings afterward only made it clearer. Every Thanksgiving, Christmas, or Jonah's birthday, the family would gather in full. His older brother Elliot and his wife Meredith always brought their daughter Clara, who was 9, just a little older than Ava. The 2 girls got along fine, but the difference in how the adults treated them was impossible to ignore. Clara was always the favorite, the head seat at the table, the bunny-themed plate, the custom cake with her name in chocolate. Meanwhile, Ava received a small box without wrapping paper. Last year, Clara was gifted an electronic game worth hundreds of dollars. Ava unwrapped a thin children's book, missing pages. I was ready to speak up, but Jonah gently shook his head, giving me a look across the table, silently pleading, "Not now." I didn't make a scene, but I remembered. One time, on the way home, Ava asked me, "Mom, why did I only get a bookmark and Clara got an Elsa doll?" I swallowed hard. Maybe Grandma and Grandpa thought you'd like the book more. You do like books, right? Ava nodded slightly, but her little eyes didn't hide the sadness. She understood, and I hated that moment, when a child begins to accept being left out as something normal. Last summer, Jonah agreed to take the family to his childhood farm, where he and Elliot had grown up. It was Cheryl's idea, saying she wanted the grandkids to connect with nature, learn to camp and garden. I agreed, though a part of me hesitated. The trip lasted 3 days, but after half a day I already wanted to pack up and leave. As soon as we arrived, Clara was swept up into Martin's arms. He spun her around in a field of lavender, laughing thunderously. Ava stood next to me, holding her backpack with one hand, clutching my sleeve with the other. No one picked her up. No one said, "Look how big you've gotten." But the worst part came at dinner. Cheryl served her homemade peach cobbler, exactly 6 slices. Clara got the biggest one. Ava got none. "Too much sugar isn't good if you haven't finished your veggies," Cheryl said without lifting her eyes from her napkin. Ava said nothing, but she didn't touch her plate for the rest of the meal. Jonah finally spoke up. "Mom, if Clara gets dessert, so does Ava." Clara finished her food. Ava didn't. "Ava is also your granddaughter," Jonah said firmly, cutting her off. No one responded. The silence was heavier than stone. That night, Jonah and I lay in silence in the wooden guest room. He didn't speak, just sighed deeply. I couldn't hold it in. "I know you don't want to confront them, but if you let this continue, Ava will grow up thinking she deserves to be treated like this. Is that what you want?" Jonah turned toward me. For the first time, I saw a genuine inner conflict in his eyes. "You're right. I'll talk to them tomorrow." But I didn't wait until tomorrow, because when I woke up early the next morning, Ava wasn't in bed. I ran outside. Through the morning mist, I saw her pulling weeds along the fence, her tiny hands covered in dirt, cheeks flushed from the sun. Cheryl stood nearby, arms crossed, barking. "If you want to be here, you need to work like a good little granddaughter." I couldn't breathe. My ears rang. I walked forward, barely keeping calm. "Ava, get inside, now." Cheryl turned, startled when she saw me. She gave a dry laugh. "I'm just teaching her responsibility. She needs to understand her place." I looked straight into her eyes, my voice colder than the June morning breeze. "My daughter doesn't need lessons from someone who doesn't know how to be a grandmother." For the first time, Cheryl was speechless. In early March, my company held a national strategy conference in Dallas. I was planning to opt out. But unfortunately, our biggest project of the quarter, a campaign in partnership with a nationwide retail chain, was selected as the central topic. My boss called me into his office, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. "Cora, you're the lead. If you're not there, we lose the deal." I couldn't say I'm a mom to step back from the responsibility. No matter what else I was, I still had to ensure the work ran smoothly. Jonah hugged me from behind in the kitchen as I flipped through the calendar. "Go ahead." "I've got Ava." I turned to look at him, lips slightly pressed. "Are you sure? I'll be gone for 4 days. School schedule, homework, dance class, that speech she's preparing for the school contest." "I've got it. You forget I used to manage a 10-person team?" I chuckled, not out of amusement, but exhaustion. But before I could breathe a sigh of relief, 2 days before the trip, Jonah got an emergency call from work. The Phoenix office reported a customer data crisis, and they needed a senior manager on site for an audit. "I'll only be gone 2 days. I'll be back Sunday night. You can handle the last 2 days, right?" I said nothing. Ava's sitter was away on a long-distance internship. Our closest neighbor had just moved. My mom was in Vermont, recovering from eye surgery, and couldn't fly. Jonah spoke up, like he'd just thought of something. "What about my parents? Cheryl's always said she wanted more time with Ava. Maybe..." This is a good chance. I stood still. Reflexively, I shook my head. No, I don't want her alone with them. Jonah didn't blame me. He knew why. But every option was a dead end. After much hesitation, I reluctantly agreed. On one condition. Only for the first 2 days. The moment you're back, you pick Ava up. No exceptions. Friday morning, Cheryl and Martin came to pick up Ava at our house. I still remember the feeling in my stomach, low and constant, like my gut was trying to warn me something was about to go wrong. We're taking her to White Pine Lake. No cell signal, but peaceful, fresh air. It'll be good for her. I knelt and hugged Ava. She wore the sea green sweater I had just knit last week, her small shoulders trembling slightly. I'll call. Answer when you get signal, okay? Okay? I'll bring my journal. If I can't call, I'll write so you can read later. She hugged me tight, longer than usual. The Dallas conference was more crowded, louder, and more suffocating than I expected. But I still called Ava every night. The first night, the signal was weak. I barely heard her tiny voice. Today I helped Grandma pick asparagus. She said, lazy kids don't deserve dessert after dinner. I pressed for more, but Ava simply whispered, "It's okay, Mom, I'm fine." The second night, I called 3 times. No one picked up. My texts weren't read. I started to feel anxious. Jonah messaged me saying on my way home, but his flight was delayed due to a sandstorm. I felt like I was locked in a fancy conference room while my insides burned hour by hour. On the third night, around 7 p.m., I was having dinner with clients when my phone buzzed. A text from Jonah. "I'm home. Cheryl said Ava was already asleep, so they let her stay one more night. They said they'll bring her back tomorrow." I immediately dropped my fork, stepped away from the table, and called Cheryl. She picked up after 12 rings. "Oh, Cora, I didn't know you were calling. Signal's terrible here." "Where's Ava?" "Sleeping. She didn't eat well today. Made a mess in the room, so I had her mop the floor for a bit, teach her a lesson." My throat tightened. My heart pounded like a hammer. "You made an 8-year-old mop the floor as punishment? The girl needs discipline. You've been spoiling her way too much." I stood up from the table, ignoring the stares around me. I spoke through gritted teeth into the phone. "I'm coming back, and you will never, ever be alone with my daughter again. Ever." The next morning, I caught the earliest flight and rushed straight to Cheryl and Martin's house. But when I got there, the front yard was silent. No kids, no voices, no one home. I called and called, no answer. I walked around back. And that's when I saw Ava. Sitting on the wooden steps, hugging her knees, hair messy, pants dirty, face flushed like she was close to a fever. When she looked up at me, for the first time, there was no light left in her eyes. I drove like I'd lost control, racing from Cheryl's backyard back into the city. Ava sat in the passenger seat, curled up in Jonah's old hoodie I kept in the trunk. For nearly an hour, she said nothing, just hugged her knees and stared straight ahead. Her eyes were swollen, hands trembling, and a small scratch on her chin stood out starkly against her pale skin. I tried not to grip the steering wheel too tightly, but my wrists already ached with anger, ached with guilt, and worst of all, because Ava hadn't shed a single tear. When we got home, I carried her into the bathroom, turned on the warm water, and gently took off her shoes and socks. "What happened to your foot?" Ava pulled back slightly as I noticed a long red mark stretching from her ankle to the top of her foot. "Grandma made me scrub the stone walkway. I had to use a wire brush." I froze. "Did Clara do it with you?" Ava shook her head. "Clara went skateboarding. Grandpa took her, and bought her ice cream, too. Grandma said I didn't deserve any." I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood, but I kept asking. "Why did she say that?" Ava lowered her eyes, her thin little hands clutching the towel. She said, "Because I'm not her real granddaughter." It felt like someone was slicing into my heart, one stroke at a time. "Did she say anything else?" Ava nodded, then whispered like she was scared I couldn't bear it. She said, You only adopted me out of pity, that if it weren't for you, I'd be in an orphanage, and because of that, I should know my place. A surge of something raw and primal rose in me. Shock, pain, fury, unlike anything I'd ever felt. I pulled her close, rested my forehead on her damp hair. Listen to me, Ava. Every word. I never pitied you. I chose you. I chose to be your mother. No one forced me. Not out of duty, not out of guilt, but out of love. Ava let out a tiny gasp and finally cried. I held her until the bath water turned cold. That night, I called Jonah. His voice was hoarse on the other end of the line. I just got home. They told me you took Ava without asking. That you're overreacting. I held my breath. I found her sitting alone in the backyard. Cold, hungry, scratched up, and silent like a ghost. And where were they? Jonah was quiet for a moment. Do you have any proof? His question hit like a slap. I didn't need proof. I had Ava. I have her scraped legs, her blistered hands from cleaning chemicals. I have the journal entry she wrote last night where she said they locked her in a room for 3 hours because she lied. Jonah sighed. I need to see it for myself. I didn't argue. I just sent him everything I had, photos, recordings, and a clip I filmed of Cheryl telling me that girl needs to be retrained if she wants to live in a decent home. The next morning, Jonah came home early. Ava was still sleeping. I opened my laptop and showed him the evidence. He watched once, then again. He said nothing. Finally, he stood, walked into our daughter's room. I followed, stopping at the doorway. He sat by her bed, watching the little girl curled up around her teddy bear. Ava? She opened her eyes. The moment she saw Jonah, she flinched. That broke him instantly. You're not mad at me, are you? Ava whispered. Jonah cried. No sobbing, no shaking, just silent tears falling onto her pillow. I'm sorry, I didn't know. I was wrong to trust them. And I knew he understood that sometimes blood is the sharpest blade. We decided not to let this go. Jonah emailed Cheryl and Martin, stating they were not allowed near Ava unless both of us were present. At the same time, we contacted a family lawyer to explore legal protections. That night, Ava placed her hand on my chest and asked, Mommy, am I really a part of our family? I held her hand and pressed it against my heart. You're not just a part, you are the center of it. Anyone who can't see that doesn't belong in this family. And for the first time, I saw a tiny light flicker in her eyes. That night, after all the anger had settled and Ava had been bathed, fed chicken porridge, and tucked in with her worn-out teddy bear named Buttercup, I sat at the edge of her bed, trying to keep my voice calm. Ava, I want you to tell me everything, not just what happened this morning. I want to know what the past few days were like. While I was away, what happened? She looked at me, hesitation flickering in her eyes, as if deciding whether or not to open up. After a long pause, Ava nodded. Her voice was so faint, I had to lean in to hear her. On the first day, Grandma told me, don't make a mess like those undisciplined kids. I had only taken out some colored paper to fold boats. She made me clean it all up, then didn't let me have dessert. I gently squeezed her hand but didn't interrupt. The next day, Clara wanted to go to the water park. Grandpa said only Clara could go because good girls get rewards. I had to stay. Grandma gave me a stack of towels and told me to wipe down all the kitchen chairs. I froze. While Clara got to have fun, my 8-year-old daughter was made to do housework like an unpaid maid. Did you say anything? I asked, why can't I go? Grandma said, because you're not a real Whitman. Girls in this family don't whine. She also said if I was upset, I could sit alone and reflect on my place. Ava's voice trembled when she said those words, my place. A child shouldn't know concepts like that, but Ava did, all too well. That night I slept alone. Clara got to sleep with Grandma. They locked my door. I got up from the bed and paced the room like I needed to escape my own body. Every word felt like a shard of glass slicing into me. What about the third day? Ava looked down and spilled a glass of orange juice while carrying it outside. Grandma didn't let me come back in, she said. If you can't hold your hand steady, then stand outside and learn to appreciate. It was cold. Mommy, I was really shivering, she cried, quietly, not with sobs, but the kind of stifled tears taught to children who've been told crying is being dramatic. I pulled her into my arms. She tucked into my shoulder and whispered, "Do you think I'm a burden?" It felt like a punch to the chest. No, Ava. You are a gift. The best thing that's ever happened to me. Anyone who says otherwise doesn't deserve to hear your voice, doesn't deserve to step into this home. The next morning, I printed every page of Ava's journal from the past 3 days. Some words were shaky, others smudged with tears. I kept them as evidence. Jonah sat at the kitchen table, hands clenched, face pale like the blood had drained from it. My parents did all this? To her? Do you think she made it up? No, I just can't believe it. I slid the papers toward him. Believing isn't the point anymore. What matters is what we do next to protect her. Jonah nodded, voice hoarse. I'll call them. Today. But before Jonah could make that call, Cheryl showed up. She knocked on our door that afternoon, holding a bag of cookies and wearing a fake smile, like nothing had happened. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. Ava saw her and immediately hid behind the sofa. Cora, I think we need to talk. Seems like you've misunderstood something. I blocked the doorway, strangely calm. You starved, locked up, and humiliated my daughter. You told her she wasn't family. Do you remember that? Cheryl's face drained of color. You're overreacting. That was discipline. You've spoiled her too much. I tilted my head, speaking slowly. I don't need to teach my daughter how to endure pain just to be accepted in a family. I teach her to know her worth. And that worth doesn't come from anyone's bloodline. Cheryl gripped her cookie bag tightly. You think you can keep me from seeing my granddaughter? She's not your granddaughter, she's my daughter. And yes, I can. I will. And if necessary, I'll take it to court. For the first time, Cheryl stepped back. She said nothing else, just turned away, heels clicking against the sidewalk like she was walking out of a courtroom she'd just lost. I shut the door. Ava was still hiding behind the sofa, eyes wide. I crouched down and held out my hand. You don't have to hide anymore. This is your home. And I've protected it. We didn't wait long. The next evening, Jonah called his parents and invited them over to clear things up. Not to argue, not to hear excuses, but to draw the line. We prepared carefully. Ava was sent to her best friend's house down the street, where she could play in peace and be spared from hearing anything that might hurt her again. I printed a note outlining everything that had happened. Dates, words, specific actions. Not to debate, but to make sure no one could pretend to forget. Cheryl and Martin arrived at 6 p.m. She wore a deep red sweater and more makeup than usual. He trailed behind, hands in his coat pockets, avoiding eye contact. I opened the door. No tea offered, no kitchen pleasantries, no small talk. We sat in the living room. Jonah spoke first, his voice low and firm. Mom, Dad, we're not here tonight to reconcile. We're here to set boundaries. Cheryl frowned. Boundaries? What's so serious? Jonah, is Cora putting you up to this? I stayed calm. If you still have a shred of respect for me, don't talk like that. This isn't about me. It's about Ava. Jonah nodded. What you did to her is unacceptable. Neglect, favoritism, emotional abuse. It crossed every line any adult should have with a child, especially within a family. Martin sighed. Jonah, you're overreacting. Kids make things up to get sympathy. She's not your blood. How could... Jonah cut in immediately. That's exactly the issue. Ava is our daughter, not a stepchild, not a foster kid. She's a full member of this family, and anyone who can't accept that has no place in her life. Cheryl let out a laugh, but it was ice cold. So what now? We're supposed to bow down and apologize to a stray off the street? My knuckles whitened from clenching my fists. No, you don't need to apologize to Hava, because apologies require genuine remorse. But from now on, you and Martin will not be allowed alone with her. Every visit will be supervised, no exceptions. If you violate this, we will cut all contact. Martin leaned forward. You're tearing this family apart over a little misunderstanding? Jonah stared directly at him, unblinking. Not a little. This has been building for 3 years, and it all exploded over 3 days. Ava learned to stay silent because she was afraid of being blamed. She believed she wasn't worthy of love. That's not a misunderstanding. That's harm. Cheryl stood up suddenly. I raised 2 sons. No one gets to say, I'm a bad grandmother. I replied coldly. You can believe what you want, but Ava's feelings are what matter, and you failed her. Martin remained quiet, eyes on the floor. Jonah turned to his mother one last time. If you truly want to remain part of Ava's life, it starts with respecting her as a regular child, not a real grandchild or a lesser one. And that means no unsupervised visits, no discipline your way, no repeated insults. From now on, we decide. Cheryl shook her head and stormed out. I won't stand here and be insulted by my own son. You want war? Fine. Just wait. The door slammed behind them. We didn't speak for a long while. Jonah rested his head on his hand, exhaling like he'd lifted a boulder off his chest. You did great, Cora. I didn't feel proud, I just felt hollow. We didn't do great, Jonah. We only did what was right, and later than she deserved. Late that night, I peeked into Ava's room. She was hugging Buttercup, her face peaceful in sleep. I sat beside her bed and whispered, Everything will be different from now on, my love, I promise. And for the first time in many nights, I didn't dream of her being left behind. 2 days after the tense confrontation with Cheryl and Martin, our home phone wouldn't stop ringing. It wasn't them, it was Jonah's extended family. His cousin was the first to call, her voice half accusatory, half angry. Cora, what is going on? Cheryl just called me, crying like I've never heard before. She said you're trying to tear the family apart, making things up about Ava and blowing it out of proportion. I held the phone, paused a few seconds, then answered calmly. I don't have to make anything up. Everything is true, and I have proof. But she's not really their blood, Cora. You have to understand what a grandmother feels. I let out a cold laugh. A real grandmother wouldn't leave an 8-year-old out in the cold and call her undeserving. If that's the behavior you're defending, then I have nothing more to say. She hung up right after, but the phone kept ringing. Cousins, longtime family friends, even an elderly aunt from Seattle who's never met Ava called just to let Cora know she's hurting the people who raised Jonah. Jonah noticed I was holding back tears. He took the phone from me and began answering each call himself. No, my mother is not the victim. Ava is the one who's been hurt. And if you don't believe it, come see the photos, journal entries, and her own words. The silence that followed lasted longer than I expected. Maybe Jonah's firmness made them hesitant, but the most surprising response came from Liam, Jonah's youngest brother. Liam is a quiet type, lives in Colorado, and usually only shows up during the holidays. His daughter Clara is the same age as Ava. The 2 girls used to play together during family gatherings. That afternoon, Liam video called Jonah, and I was there when he answered. Hey guys. Jonah, I talked to Mom and Dad. I don't know what to say, but after hearing it, I feel... Jonah nodded silently. Liam continued. Claire told me Ava wasn't allowed cake, was made to clean the yard, and got yelled at by Grandma. At first, I thought she was making it up, but then her voice was trembling. I leaned toward the screen. Is Clara okay? She's fine, but she keeps asking, did that happen to Ava because she's adopted? Liam sighed. You get it, both girls are being affected, and I can't defend Mom on this. For the first time in the middle of all this chaos, I cried. but this time it was because someone was standing up for my daughter. Thank you, Liam. I want to help. I'll speak to them directly, and if needed, I'll confirm everything Clara said. She's not lying. That night, Liam posted on his personal Facebook page. No names, no locations, but clear enough for the entire family to know who he meant. Blood does not define how a child should be treated. If you, as an adult, choose to treat two kids differently because only one shares your blood, the problem isn't with the child, it's with you. I stand with kindness, not toxic tradition. The post was shared hundreds of times within hours. People who'd stayed silent began calling back, but this time to apologize. Some messaged me privately, saying they had no idea how serious it was. Others admitted they'd noticed Cheryl favoring Clara too much, but had been too afraid to speak up. I wasn't looking for validation, but I knew. On my own, I could shout forever and still be unheard. Yet with Jonah and Liam standing beside our girl, the truth had no choice but to be heard. The next day, Cheryl sent an email. Just one line. If you've convinced the whole family to side with you, then you've won. But don't expect me to kneel. I didn't respond, because deep down I knew this wasn't a victory. This was only the beginning of reclaiming dignity for a child hurt by those who were supposed to love her unconditionally. 2 weeks after everything exploded, I took Ava to see a child psychologist. Dr. Rachel Brenner's office sat on the second floor of a red brick building near Centennial Park. The room was bright, with a large window, soft couches, and shelves full of comic books and stuffed animals of every kind. At first, Ava was silent, barely speaking. She sat hugging Buttercup, eyes fixed on the window. But Dr. Brenner didn't rush her. She didn't pry. She sat with Ava, worked on puzzles, then gently introduced a modern fairy tale about a brave little girl who didn't need a crown to know she was worthy. Gradually, Ava began to open up. She said she used to believe she was just a guest in our home, that if she made a mistake, I'd change my mind and send her back, like returning a broken item. My chest tightened. Who told you that? No one said it outright, but Grandma used to say, "You're lucky Cora's a kind woman." So I thought, if you stopped being kind, then... I squeezed her hand, but Dr. Brenner gently interjected. "Ava, your mom doesn't love you out of kindness. She loves you because you are you, and you deserve to be loved like that. No proof needed, no conditions." Ava stayed quiet for a moment, then nodded. The following therapy sessions were regular. Sometimes Ava talked, sometimes she just drew. But every drawing, every scribbled sentence on sketch paper, was a window into a young soul that had been abandoned too early. Jonah and I joined some private sessions as well. We learned how to listen without interrupting, how to respond without invalidating her feelings. We learned how to apologize, even when we didn't think we were wrong. Because sometimes a child doesn't need a justification. They need their pain acknowledged. Jonah changed the most. He became more intentional, no longer hesitating to say "my daughter" in public. He was the one who suggested they create a new family album, printing pictures from the first day I adopted her, school festivals, birthdays, and even that first clumsy attempt at skiing. We're doing this so Ava knows she's always been part of this, not just in our house, but in our memories. One evening after therapy, Ava sat down at the kitchen table, grabbed her markers, and drew a small house. On the roof, in messy handwriting, she wrote, "This is my real home. No one can take it." I choked up. 6 months later, Ava had a school presentation titled "My Family." I braced myself for a short, awkward speech, but when she stepped up to the front, holding a drawing of Buttercup, 2 adults holding an umbrella and a girl smiling beneath it, I knew something had shifted. My family isn't like everyone else's. I don't live with my birth parents, but I live with people who choose to love me every day, even when I'm grumpy, messy, or afraid to sleep alone. The room was silent. My family doesn't share DNA. But we share a heart. I sat in the back row, gripping the edge of the chair, holding back tears. Jonah didn't even try. One tear ran down his cheek. On the drive home, Ava turned to me and asked, "Mom, can I call him Dad now, not Jonah anymore?" I looked at her, and in that moment, no word could describe the joy inside me. Jonah, the man who once froze in silence when his parents insulted her, now sat beside me, his eyes red. "Only if that's what you really want, Ava." She nodded and leaned her head on his shoulder. We didn't cut Cheryl and Martin off entirely, but every interaction was monitored, brief, and with clear boundaries. Cheryl tried to reconnect, bringing gifts and a forced smile. Ava accepted the gift, thanked her, then returned to playing with Clara, keeping her distance. There was no bitterness in her eyes, only a quiet maturity I had never seen in an 8-year-old. I used to think I needed to protect Ava from the world outside, but now I know some battles begin within the walls we assume are safest. And through it all, I've learned this: family isn't where you're born, it's where you're chosen, where you're heard, and where love is given, without conditions. Ava is my daughter, no blood required, only heart. Cora and Ava's story is proof that love doesn't require blood to be sacred. In a society still weighed down by blood ties bias, their journey reminds us that real family is built through choice, commitment, and showing up for one another, every single day. Sometimes to protect a child, we must draw lines, even with those closest to us. And in that brave moment of standing up, love becomes its fullest, most powerful form. What do you think of Cora's choice? Would you do the same to protect your child? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more moving, meaningful stories about family and life.